From the NBL to the NBA to the Olympics, we'll do our absolute best to get through it all in the next 30 minutes. This is The Jump presented by Hungry Jack's. The burgers are better at Hungry Jack's. Andrew Gazey, he'll be with me for the duration as well. And we'll ask whether Xavier Cooks makes the Sydney Kings instant title favourites. We also got a pair of potentially daunting Paris groups for the Boomers and the Opals. How concerned should Aussie Hoops fans be? Before we get to that, tonight's opening tip. It's not win or season done for the Jack Jumpers on Friday night, but there's no question Game 2 will have that type of feel. United, they controlled Game 1 from start to finish, dominating on both ends to roll to a 23-point dub. Remember, before this blowout, the Jack Jumpers' biggest loss of the season came by just 8 points. Tasmania were a popular pick entering the series, in Melbourne, well, perhaps they just sent a timely reminder of why they sat on the top of the standings all season long. And the numbers, well, they don't paint a particularly pretty picture for Ant fans. To steal one of Gazey's favourite words, it was an evisceration across the board, from rebounding to second chance points to fast break points to second unit scoring. But unlike the regular season, the margin of victory, well, you would think it would be a non-factor come tip-off time in Game 2 on Friday night as we bring in Andrew Gazey, and you were there courtside. And I don't think for the first 3 quarters of this game, Gazey, that margin was really reflective of what we were watching. How did Melbourne do this? Because this felt comprehensive right from the opening tip.
Well, it did. Well, in fact, I disagree slightly. I thought in the first quarter it was a highly competitive game. Both teams shooting the ball really well, very efficient on the offensive end. And it just took a time for who was going to be able to establish the defensive authority. And that ultimately went to Melbourne United. They did a great job on Milton Doyle and Jack McVeigh in particular. Milton Doyle still was a bit over 50%, but what they did to Jordan Crawford in particular was completely smothered him. He only had 7 points. He was 3 of 13 from the field in a little over 30 minutes of action. McVeigh has been a superstar and only had the 13 points. And it really was up to Anthony Dribbick, who stepped up and got the scoreboard ticking over with his 18 points, which was a little bit of a surprise given what we've seen of him throughout the playoffs so far. But Melbourne United on the defensive end cranked it up and then just got going on the offense. They were 14 to 28, so 50% from the three-point line. Chris Golding and Ian Clark were on fire from the three-point line. Overall, they were over 50%, and Joe Luala-Chul owned the middle. So it was a comprehensive win for Melbourne United in Game 1.
So I mentioned the fact that their biggest loss before this was only 8 points. It was also only the second time this season they'd given up 100 points. The last time that happened was back in September. There was a season opener against the Perth Wildcats, so it had been a while. This is a team that I think we generally think is pretty calm and calculated, and they reflect their coach, Scott Roth. Do you think that this type of blowout can rattle them entering Game 2, even though the series has just got going?
No, I don't think so. Like you mentioned, you can only go on the body of work that they've done throughout the entire season, and they've showed great resilience. Defensively, it's held up, and offensively, they've been able to control the tempo with the way in which they, the pace of play at which they play at. And I think when you think of this game too, a lot different proposition going in and playing a game on their home court. The emotion of the fans, it's going to be packed. It's going to be a really intense environment. And let's not forget that the Jack Jumpers beat Melbourne United 2 out of 3 throughout the course of the regular season anyway. So they have the formula. Yes, it was a down game for them, and they need to improve at both ends of the floor. But I don't think that they're going to be intimidated or overreact to this Game 1 loss.
Now, in the midst of this was Tassie. As you pointed to, they didn't start off too bad in this game, and it felt like Chris Golding was the man that was hitting those back-breaking threes. Just when you're a player out there and you've got a guy hitting those degree of difficulty shots that he was making, one from the corner right in front of the bench, how demoralising is that? Because we already know that you can't guard CG43, but when he's hitting those shots, it feels like you got to be thinking to yourself, well, I don't know what we do about this.
No, and that's right. And he's a superstar of the competition, Chris Golding. And the minute he steps over the halfway line, he's in range. He can shoot it from anywhere. He gets a lot of touches, and he can make really tough shots where sometimes the defense is as good as you can expect or you want it to be. But good offense has just beaten good defense on some occasions. But for me, it's about trying to limit his opportunities, try to be very physical, which they did. They did try and rough him up a little bit. But once he sees a couple go through, he is a tough proposition because he'll take what for many are outrageous shots and he can make them fall. He was on fire, 6 of 10 from the three-point line, hit some real tough ones. And how they limit him is going to be part of the equation. But the biggest thing, it's not just him. It makes it really hard just to lock into one guy if you're going to put all your defensive efforts into him because there's so many other people that can beat you as well. Clark coming off the bench, Joe down low, Luke Travers running the floor. Shea Illy never had a great shooting night, but he can also get it going as well. So it's one that you don't want to overreact to that one performance by Chris because there are many others on the roster that can still beat you.
So you already mentioned the struggles for the Jack Jumpers. They've been such a great offense all season. Can you pinpoint one guy? I'm not sure if that's possible because it felt like a number of the key players were down on their usual input or output, but who's the guy you're looking at for the Jack Jumpers?
Well, for me, the one they can get the biggest lift from is Jordan Crawford. He had a poor series against the Perth Wildcats, and that game one, he was well below what they need for the Jack Jumpers to be competitive. He was 3 of 13 from the field, took some tough shots, and a few untimely turnovers as well. So I think if they can get more offense out of him, that's going to help their cause, which they need. It's very difficult to beat Melbourne United if you're shooting in the low 80s. We saw that really good series against the Illawarra Hawks, and in the first two games, which went to overtime, the Hawks had to score over 100 in order to get to that situation. The Jack Jumpers, with the way they play, shooting over 100 is going to be a challenge, like you mentioned right off the top. But they need to find a way to be more efficient and also to get into the 90s to give themselves a chance to compete against the offensive juggernaut, which is the Melbourne United, because your defense is going to be tested and it's very, very hard to contain Melbourne into the 80s. So offense is going to be a big part of what they do, and I think Jordan Crawford is the one that can step up and really give them a lift in that area.
It's going to be a very loud building. But the road to Paris, they hit a significant milestone yesterday, the Boomers and Opals. It might be a tough road to the podium. How concerned is Andrew Gazey? We're talking Olympic hoops next. Welcome back to The Jump, presented by Hungry Jacks. The Paris Olympics somehow just 4 months away, and the Boomers, well, they've been drawn into Group B with an NBA-loaded Canada squad. They still have to wait for the other two teams in this group, Olympic qualifying tournaments, to play. That could include Spain. It could also include a Luka Doncic-led Slovenia or maybe a Giannis-led Greece. But all of this is to say that it could be a potentially intimidating group on paper for the Boomers as they look to try and get back onto the podium when they do get to Paris. Andrew Gazey, a man that we like to talk to when we get to this type of topic, particularly when it comes to the Boomers. What was your first reaction to this group? Because there's still some questions to be answered, but there's no question. It could have been easier.
That's for sure. And I think the biggest thing is if you had your choice, this wouldn't be the group that you would want to be getting into. But there is a little asterisk next to it, of course, because we don't know who those teams eventually will be. But it's highly likely it's going to be the host of those qualifiers in Greece and Spain. We suspect anything can happen because they've still got some work to do. But not only are you getting those qualifiers that have come through, you're getting two teams that are hardened for tournament play. The qualifying tournaments are played in early July, so they go through a series of 3 or 4 games where they're playing to actually get to the Olympics. So when they do actually get there, you've got a team that's very experienced. So it's going to be a tough one for the Boomers. But, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to beat them at some stage if you consider yourself a medal contender, and we do. So we should be fearful of no one. Canada's going to be tough with their stars if they all show up. Jamal Murray, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Dylan Brooks, RJ Barrett and the like. They are going to be very, very tough. And if Giannis and his brother Costas come along for Greece, you know that they're going to cause some problems as well. But if you think like I do, that we're in a position to not only win a medal, but win a gold medal, you should fear no one, take on the best, and hopefully that'll prepare us for those quarterfinals, semi-finals, and ultimately that very important gold medal game.
Yeah, and we look at the rankings of those teams, and that comes into how these teams are drawn. And Canada, even though they're ranked, I think, 7th in the world, that's not indicative of the team that could potentially be there on the squad. The one thing you pointed to was the warm-up games or the qualifying games that these teams are going to have to play. So if you're Brian Goorjian right now, are you also bothered by the fact that you have to wait until 2 weeks before the Olympics tip off before you know you're going to play? Does that impact preparation, you think?
Not a great deal. I think that they have such short preparation time anyway. They pretty much focusing on themselves, getting their own game plan down and putting in their schemes both offensively and defensively, and then you try to adapt them once you know who your opponent is going to be. So I don't think it's a huge thing not knowing. The other thing that you do get a little bit of advantage is you can go there and send your team along to sit and watch those qualifiers, and generally you're going to get a pretty good scout, good look at your opponents, and hopefully that'll help in the preparation for the teams that we've got to play against. And it's no certainty, by the way, that Greece and Spain get there. Both those teams are going through a period where they're transitioning from different eras. So there's an element of unknown about it, but hopefully that they can use the advantage of going there and sitting there and watching them play to help with their preparation.
You're exactly right. It might not be those two teams, but let me put you on the spot now then. So if it's not Greece, maybe it'll be Slovenia and Luka Doncic. And let's face it, the Boomers know this team very well. They've seen them twice at the Olympics and also in the World Cup last year. So if you have your choice, Luka and Slovenia or Giannis or Greece, what do you got? What do you want, Gazey? That's not a very nice answer either way.
That is true. I guess right now, if you go back to recent history and the problems we had at Luka at the World Cup, you might want to avoid him and say, hey, we'll rather have a crack at this man, the Greek freak. And he's going to present a matchup problem for any team you're playing against. But already with Luka, the way that he's performing in the NBA and recently, the 30-point triple-doubles, or what do you have, 7 or 8 of them in a row, he is going to be a handful. So neither one of them is going to be all that pleasant. But like I keep saying, if you're going to give yourself a chance to compete for a gold medal, you should not be fearful of any of these teams. And as we look at the World Cup record at 10th, perhaps not indicative of the talent that we had. And for us in the pool, you got to remember there's 3 pools of 4. You get to the top 2 in your pool and you're automatically through, and then it's the 2 best third place teams that ultimately make it. So you think that the pool that we're in with the competition is going to be presented, that hopefully we can at the very least get into that next round and continue on the journey.
Yeah, I apologise for that. That was not very nice by me. So, Gazey, you owe me one for that question there. But if we get to the Opals and what they're going to be looking at in Paris, it's also a challenging group for Sandy Brondello's squad. Canada and the host nation France there as well is always going to present a problem. Nigeria also in this group, who had to come through qualification in their own right. So they've done the hard yards even to get to Paris. So the Opals, this is going to be challenging. You've played against host nations before. I certainly sat back in my seat and said, gee, I don't know if you want to be going against the home fans. Does it really matter? What kind of challenge is that going to be?
Well, I think if you are going to have to play them, it's better to play them early. If you're in their pool, you want the very first game to be against them, because sometimes the emotion of the circumstance can get the better of them. It certainly did for the Opals. You go back to 2012 in Sydney. We played against France, I think it was, in the opening game, and they got hold of us. We've had some real battles against France over the journey, and you think that they are going to be a threat. Canada, 4th place. We beat them in the bronze medal game at the World Cup, but they are stacked full of talent as well. So it's again, probably not the draw if Sandy Brondello is having a choice of who she'd like to play against. This probably not the pool that she would have picked, but I think that we are well prepared. I like our team. I like some of the youth coming through. And again, I think we're going to have a chance to test ourselves in the pool, and that can sometimes be great preparation for when you're playing for your life in that quarterfinal and semi-final action.
Let's at least look at the positives. Neither the Boomers or the Opals got Team USA in their group, so that's something to be happy about. They also played Canada twice in that Women's World Cup that you were talking about there. Things are going to change. There's going to be different players. We don't know about Lauren Jackson. She had 30 in that bronze medal game. In your experience and what you've seen over the time, are you even able to carry anything over from those tournaments in terms of confidence against potential nations that you've had successful times against in the past?
A little bit. I think if you look at our Opals team, and it's still to be decided, you've got some really good new players coming into the ranks. Isabelle Bourlet, she looks like she's going to be a real good one. But by and large, it's going to be a similar group. Now, yes, it's a couple of years later, but Lauren Jackson doesn't seem to age, and by all reports, she might still be a candidate to make the team. And the Canada, the same thing. You know, we don't know what team they're going to present, but you'd think that there's going to be some similarities. Now, you're right, it's not always the case. 2 years is a long time, but just with the generations coming through, I think they're going to be similar, and I think that we can draw some parallels to what we've done, and unfortunately, those parallels suggest that it's going to be very, very tight.
No, we love it. We always love the inside. And up next, a little bit of truth or trash. Xavier Cooks and the Kings. Are they title favourites? Jock Landale, is he a lock to start in Paris? And Gazey might be able to get stuck into me for a potentially bad take I had. That's coming up next.
Here he is for three. Huge! 7 on the shot clock for Walton Jr. Got it! He has been huge. Cook still fighting for it. The Sydney Kings sit on their throne and rule over the NBL. Back-to-back champions.
The glory days of the Sydney Kings, only actually a year ago. Welcome back to The Jump, presented by Hungry Jacks. It's time now for a little bit of truth or trash. That man, Xavier Cooks, he's coming back to the NBL. He's coming back to the Sydney Kings. So first, truth or trash. Truth or trash, the Sydney Kings are title favourites by signing Xavier Cooks.
Well, it's not just the signing of Xavier Cooks. It's the man, Brian Goorjian, at the helm. And I dare say the experience that Brian Goorjian had coaching Xavier Cooks at the World Cup would have been a strong motivating factor to go to Paul Smith and the ownership group and say, open up the checkbook, please. We want to have Xavier Cooks back. He's a former MVP. What he did in that final series was spectacular. He's a rebounding fool. He can put the ball to the deck, runs the floor. Free throw shooting is probably an area he needs to improve on, but the numbers that he's been able to produce over a long period of time, they hold up. And he's certainly going to be a big factor in changing the look of the Sydney Kings. But it also, I think, depends on what else they bring along. They've got some tough decisions. What do they do with Jalen Adams, DJ Hogue? Denzel Valentine, despite his NBA experience, what's going to happen with him? And also, when you sign Xavier Cooks, what does that mean for Jonah Bolden, Alex Tui, similar type positions? So there's a bit of work to be done, but what an unbelievable starting point it is to have Xavier Cooks and Brian Goorjian to build your team around. Now, Kane. Jock Landale, he's been doing some great work. Had 7 blocks yesterday against the Washington Wizards. Truth or trash, Jock Landale is a lock to be our starting centre in a few months' time in the Paris Olympic Games.
Yeah, no hesitation here from me, Gazey. This is absolutely a truth. And by the way, you mentioned that 7-block game. He's been scoring in double digits a little bit as well. And we shouldn't be surprised by this. When you think about his NBA career over the last few years, he's had to do this every season. He's had to bide his time. It hasn't exactly been an easy ride to get in rotation minutes, whether it was in San Antonio or whether it was last year in Phoenix behind DeAndre Ayton. So this guy is the ultimate professional. He's got no problem in telling you that he wants to play and he's disappointed with the way the rotation has gone. But when you call his name, he's ready to go. Dwight Reith has been outstanding. He's been unbelievable. But for me, at least, Gazey, I think it's an absolute lock that Jock Landale will be ready to go and he'll start in Paris.
You would think so, wouldn't you? Although you don't go to sleep on Duop Reith.
Yeah.
It depends on the way Brian Goorjian wants to play, because Duop Reith, he's a different beast to Jock. That I think they'll work well in tandem. But that three ball and his perimeter game, if you want to spread the floor and open up some driving lanes, then certainly Duop Reith would be a consideration.
Yeah, they got some pretty good options. Brian Goorjian, he also coached Duop Reith, so he knows how to get a pretty high-quality five to his NBL team. Now, look, we work in an industry, Gazey, where you got to bring your opinions to the table like we do here in Truth or Trash, and sometimes it doesn't always go that well. Here's me on Isaiah Thomas.
He would be MVP. Is that truth or trash?
Well, firstly, it would be fantastic if IT was in the NBL, there's no question, but I'm going to have to say for this question, I think that it would be trash. Maybe if it was 2017, Isaiah Thomas, he would win the MVP because he was fifth in the NBA MVP in that year. So I think it would be unbelievable if he came here, but I don't think he would be my preseason pick for MVP. But if I got it wrong and I was in the building, then Isaiah Thomas would be running at me and calling me all sorts of names as well. So we'll let him get away with that. It's a little bit of a setback for me because ever since I trashed that, he has gone on to play some very nice basketball in the G League and then signed a 10-day contract with the Phoenix Suns. Andrew Gaze, truth or trash, my take on Isaiah Thomas.
I'm going to put it in I'm going to put it in the truth category. I know he's come out, he's played those 5 games in the G League, got his 32 points, and he has a career average of a little over 17 points across 550 NBA games. But he's 35 years of age, and the attention that he receives in a G League game as opposed to an NBL game, the attention he's going to receive when he's actually playing with the Suns, surrounded by some stars, is nowhere near what he has to deal with on an NBL basis day in, day out. The defenses that we are able to throw at players would make it pretty tough. And when you're 35 years of age, not that that's old, but when you're at that level and the relentless pounding that you're going to have to take here in the NBL, I'm not sure he'd be an MVP, but I'm prepared to say he would be a candidate and be a very, very good player.
No question, and that's why I love you, Gazey. That's why you're the flag bearer. That's why you would get my vote for Prime Minister. You stuck up for me, and I absolutely appreciate that. Now, I've got a surprise one for you, actually, and maybe now you get to talk about your own basketball career, truth or trash. We've seen Kyrie Irving a couple of days ago with an absolutely absurd game winner against the Denver Nuggets. So, truth or trash, Andrew Gaze, you've had a better game winner than this. This is just your standard stuff.
No, this is not standard, Kane. The left-handed floater from the free throw line. Look at Luka Doncic's reaction. He's, oh my God, you're just supposed to be able to do it. But just one of those moments. You know, they are actually the easiest shots to take, because you have no choice. When the game clock or the shot clock's running down and the ball's in your hand, half the problem is when you're a shooter is you're thinking, oh, is this the right shot to take or is it not the right shot to take? And that can mess with your head. In those circumstances, all that's out the door. Natural talent eventually prevails, and we see Kyrie with a stack of talent, left-hand push shot. There's somehow finds nothing but the bottom of the net. It's a great shot. I'll say this, I'll give him another 10 goes at it, and I don't reckon he makes 3 of them.
Yes, and he made the one. And by the way, that's a very important win for the Dallas Mavericks as well. Very sharp stuff from you, Andrew Gaze. But now it's going to be time to lock in on Game 2 between Melbourne and Tasmania. Gazey, our predictions are required, specifically yours. It's going to be a madhouse in Hobart on Friday, and I'm incredibly jealous that I'm not going to be there. We'll be back. Welcome back to The Jump, presented by Hungry Jacks. It's time for Gazey to dust off the old crystal ball and look ahead to Game 2. But before we do that, let's go back to Sunday and Game 1 with our top plays, presented by Hungry Jacks.
Took it upon himself to give Melbourne the early buffer. Big in Game 3, going from the corner. That's incredible. That is outrageous. Steal by Luala. Look out!
They're the mistakes you can't afford to make.
That is an enormous problem for the Jack Jumpers. That short. Plenty of time for Clark. Got it! A statement victory in Game 1 of the Championship Series.
By the way, an outstanding call on ESPN as well. Gazey, Ruck, Heverin and the crew were very, very nice in that one. Game 2 Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Tip-off on ESPN. And a quick turnaround to Sunday for Game 3. And the question is that potentially going to be a game where Melbourne United can close out the series? I said we were going to both dust off the crystal ball, but we don't have time. Only you, and yours is the opinion we want, let's be honest. So tell me, what's going to happen on Friday night? Are the Jackies getting back in this?
Well, based on Game 1, you wouldn't think so, but I've been around too long and seen too much of the Jack Jumpers. I think they're going to turn this around, that hostile environment they create in Tasmania. They've beaten Melbourne United twice there already this season, once by 21 points, another time by 8. So I think they're going to flip the switch. In order to do that, of course, they've got to be able to score more than 81 and somehow shut down the shooting percentages of Melbourne United. Melbourne United can't get over 100 at over 50% from the field and the three-point line, but it's going to be a tight one, but I'm just leaning towards the Jackies in this one.
No, it's a very fair call, and we mentioned right from the top, Gazey, potential players that might need to stand up. I was disappointed. We didn't see enough of Will Magnay in Game 1. Foul trouble a little bit to do with that. So hopefully for the Jack Jumpers, Will Magnay can get back in this one. Gazey, you were absolutely outstanding tonight. Game 1, as we said, 7:30 p.m. on Friday night. Melbourne United, Tassie Jack Jumpers. I'm hoping still that this is going to be a very long series. And don't forget, on ESPN right across the weekend, from the NBA to March Madness getting underway in the next couple of days, there is a smorgasbord of hoops that you can sink your teeth into over the next few days. This has been The Jump. We will be back next week. We look forward to it. Enjoy the hoops.